Coming up, more inexplicable excitement than you can possibly imagine as the right wing decides that Barack Obama made improper facial expressions at one point on his latest overseas trip. We assess the evidence. If you did not feel quite right over the weekend, it may have been because President Obama just threw away 232 3/4 years of American standing in the world by shaking hands with Hugo Chavez. It's all over now. Sorry. Chris Hayes is next. President Obama was in Trinidad this weekend at a hemispheric confab, doing the international summit thing. As is wont to happen at such events, the president of another country, specifically the president of Venezuela, stood right in front of President Obama more than once. President Obama responded with standard social graces. And that, according to President Obama's critics on the American right, was a diplomatic disaster. Here's Republican windbag emeritus Newt Gingrich on the Today Show.
Everywhere in Latin America, enemies of America are going to use the picture of Chavez smiling and being with the president as proof that Chavez is now legitimate, that he's acceptable.
Do you think he should not be trying to mend relationships with other world leaders?
How do you mend relationships with somebody who hates your country, who actively calls for the destruction of your country, and who wants to undermine you?
Well, we certainly have mended relationships with countries that have hated us in the past. Russia comes to mind. China comes to mind.
But we didn't rush over, smile, and greet Russian dictators.
Isn't Newt Gingrich a history professor? It's funny because, as far as I remember history, it includes, let's see, President Kennedy with Nikita Khrushchev, President Nixon with Leonid Brezhnev, President Ford with Brezhnev, that was cute coat, President Reagan with Mikhail Gorbachev. Smiles, everyone, smiles! And here's some cell phone video of President Obama giving President Chavez the business end of a stern talking to. President Gingrich's lecture didn't include this footage. But Professor Gingrich's historical blind spot is not limited to handshakes with evildoers. What about the Saudis?
What I find distressing is that this administration is opposed to looking for oil offshore, but the president bows to the Saudi king.
Bows to the Saudi king? President Obama shouldn't bow to the Saudi king. He should do what President Bush did, talking about our addiction to oil, and then, what was it that he did? Oh yeah, no bowing. President Bush was more the hand-holder type. And there was, the kissing. That was the customary peck on the cheek. You know, the bowing isn't okay, but the kissing's okay. It's going to be hard to remember these things. They are way more complicated than I thought they were. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor with The Nation magazine. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. I hope you can help me explain this.
Yeah, I'm thinking Newt Gingrich should write a kind of Newt's Guide to Diplomacy in which he has every world leader and then like a smiley face next to it or a frowny face, you know, just so that you can have a cheat sheet every time you go to one of these big events.
But you have to remember, like, the smiley face could mean yes to kissing, but no to bowing. Yes to bowing, no to kissing. I mean, is there a reasonable way to explain why it's okay to kiss King Abdullah, but it's not okay to bow? Is there any way to explain it?
No, there's nothing principled here. I mean, first of all, Newt Gingrich, I would love to find him a distant retirement community that we could put him in and he could play golf all day long. I mean, there's no principled objection that's happening here. What's happening here is the right is tremendously discredited. They're facing a very popular president. And so what they're doing is just kind of going to this grab bag of talking points that they generally have about generic Democrats that have served them well for 4 decades and just tossing them out and seeing what sticks. So Democrats are soft on the bad guys, or they're insufficiently patriotic, or they cede ground to our enemies. And so they're just tossing that out. There's nothing actually of substance here.
They're also not preparing adequately for the Y2K bug. It's just like, what year is this, you guys? Come on. Well, Republican Senator John Ensign of Nevada says it was irresponsible for the president to be seen kind of laughing and joking with Hugo Chavez, saying that Obama somehow hurt the prestige of the presidency. Is there any sort of code about the laughing and joking, specifically the facial expressions?
First of all, let me just say that Hugo Chavez, whatever his problems, and there are problems, no one is getting, no Venezuelans are receiving the kind of treatment that the Falun Gong are receiving in China. And no one raises a hackle when we, smile with the Chinese president or pause for photo ops. President Bush had Islam Karimov, the dictator of Uzbekistan, who human rights group accused of the most terrible, ghastly crimes, and he was actually in the White House smiling with the president, and no one raised a hackle. So there is just no absolute standard here from the conservatives. They don't like Hugo Chavez because he's a leftist and because he said mean things about George Bush, but there's no actual moral basis to their objections.
My favorite was when Bush hosted the guy who was the head at that time of the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, and he had the red carpet treatment at the White House. Then Bush sent him home and made him change the name of his organization. That was really showing him. All right, Chris, last question. President Obama, a very popular president, not just here, but around the world. He has a much higher popularity rating in Venezuela than Hugo Chavez does. Did Obama somehow get taken advantage of by Chavez? I mean, is it possible that Chavez is trying to glean something off Obama's popularity?
I'm sure he is. I mean, he clearly wanted to get the photo with Obama. But at the end of the day, who really cares? I mean, is a photo going to be what resuscitates the political fortunes of Hugo Chavez? If he is really so terrible, as all the right wing says, are the Venezuelan people going to be fooled by a photo with Chavez holding a Galliano book? Of course not. I mean, it's a ridiculous accusation.
But it makes it easy to talk about, that's for sure. Chris Hayes, Washington editor with The Nation, thank you very much for your time tonight, sir. Nice to see you.
Nice.